No, I don't need to start that. Um, Mostly because our Olamot have not been a real part of my practice, so I didn't have that much to say about it or what I thought each one was. But, we've been sitting with it, for, I don't know how long it is now since we started Shara Kavanah. And I've been paying attention to it. And I think I've actually reverse engineered from my davening to the Olamot, which is to say, rather than have an idea, oh, this is the Olamot, this is, whatever, this is Olam Asiyah, this is Olam Yitzirah, okay, how do I put that into my davening? I've kind of reversed engineered. Like I've said, okay, so this is what I'm doing in Psukkah Zimra, and Psukkah Zimra happen within Olama Yetzirah, then what is Olama what is Olama Yetzirah relative to where I am in my davening, which I don't think is as absurd as it sounds, given that, over the last 30 years, a lot of people who are invested, not a lot, there aren't a lot, certainly aren't a lot in my world, but people who are deeply invested in this world, have said, you're doing the davening right. So I thought, I can count on that and sort of try to work it back. But so I am beginning to get some kind of sense of what this, Atzilut Yetzirah Siyah thing is. Mostly, I mean, I think the most important thing, and we did talk about that in the beginning, is remembering that, like, I understand why they're using the word Olamot, but Olamot is confusing. It's not like we say Olamot, we think, like, in science fictions where there's, a multiverse, and there's, this universe in which this is happening and this universe in which that is happening. And I just don't think that's a use. I mean, it's clear to me that the Mekubalim in the tradition of the Ari aren't thinking about it that way. Like, it's not, oh, there's this one world in which you do things. It's called Yitzirah, one world. It's like, that's not what it is. What it is it's a lens. There's one world. It's Shnai Echad. There's one world. And the way we describe the dynamics of the world, sort of our great mythological story is what's called Olam Atzilut, right? That's our myth. That's the way we describe the dynamics in the world. That's why when we did Otzot Chaim cover to cover, all of Otzot Chaim happens in Olam Atzilut. Right? It's telling the story. There's like this one chapter in the end that sort of gives you a whole list of numbers saying, that's what it looks like in Yetzirah. But you know, 380 out of 400 pages are Olam Atzilut. That's our mythical story. That's the dynamics. That's the thing we're trying to see. That you can look at it through different lenses. You can experience it from different angles. And that's the thing that we call Olamot. That's what we call Olamot, Olam Asiyah, Yetzirah, Bria, right? That's not my reverse engineering. That's very clear to me from, like, all the Mekubalim that I'm reading, is that there's one Olam, there's one universe, within that universe, there are dynamics. The dynamics that we connect to in that universe are the ones we describe as Olam Atzilut. The other three are angles with which we connect to those dynamics, to what's happening. And the funny thing was, I discovered that as I worked back from my davening, I was actually getting very, very close to, oh, there's magic. Hi, Margie. Talking a little bit about Olamot, and then we'll get back into Shema. And so I discovered that really interestingly, like what I was, the way I began articulating Olamot was actually very close to the way Zalman did. So then I went back and I read sort of the way he talks about it in Paradigm Shift, and he uses his words and his things, but it made me suspicious that he might have followed the same path I did about this too. But al regel achat, right? So, like we learned, you know, what is olam asiyah, right? Olam asiyah is when you connect to these dynamics through physical actions, through your physical body, right? It's Birkot HaShachar, it's putting on tefillin, it's putting on tzitzit, right? It's having a body, living in a body, doing physical actions, right? That's one way in which we connect to these dynamics that we describe in Olam HaTzilut. Then the second part is Psukkah Zimra, right? In Psukkah Zimra, what do? Right? In Psukkah Zimra, to we allow the flow to take us, the flow of nigun, which is not, it's not about, even if you're using words poetically, you're not using words as sort of analytically creating structures. Right, you're flowing with the tune. Right? That's the way we practice it, at least. Right? Psukkah Zimra, you're flowing with the tune. And so that's that part of the self, the part that feels, that flows, that relates to things that are not held nicely in boxes, right? The emotional, the imaginal, right? That part, right? That's another way in which we connect to the dynamics that we have otherwise called Olamot, right? It's through that part of ourselves. And then the Shema, right? We know what do? We sort of set ourselves in a context, right? And we make our commitment to this project, to the avoda, right? That's conceptualizing, right? That's conceptualizing. That's big concepts, big context, sort of understanding, creating frameworks, right? That's Alama Bria, right? And and you remember that both in the Zohar and in the Niari, it's not like in the classic rabbinic Hechalot, right? In the classic rabbinic Hechalot, you walk through the Hechalot, right, one after another until you reach the throne room. But in both the Zohar and the Ari, you take it with you, right? It's itkalalut, right? You take one olam with you into the next and into the next. So really what you're doing is you're expanding your capacity to see. So Tfilat Shachar starts with, all right, let's just focus like on the physical. How do I connect to that place? And then you don't leave that behind. Your body doesn't fall away when you start Psukkah Zimra. You are in the body, and in the body, you're connecting to this flow, which is emotional, imaginal, affect. Right? You hold that in a body, right? That's itkalalut. And then you go on to the next stage, right? In which you conceptualize. That's where a lot of us do tend to suddenly forget. Like we're so in the mind that we forget that, oh, we have a body, we have feelings. We just like live in these, palaces of ideas. But Hitkalalut is not that as you hold it. Like you hold the body, you still have a body, you still have all of the inner parts that you've awakened that are alive inside you. And with that, right, you allow your brain to create frameworks to hold, to orient you, towards this. And then you take all of that with you into the silence of Olamot. So, so like that's what so what we're doing in Shema, right? Shema is the the certainly in the Aris, but even in the Zohar, the Shema is the commitment time, right? It's a conceptual, it's an idea thing, right? But the Aris says, oh, from there, in Heichala Ahava, right? Because that's love is also, right? Love is a feeling, but we're thinking about it, we're framing it, we're putting it in the context of a relationship. Right, we're thinking about it in context even of relationships that we imagine. Like there's so much at Kalalut happening here. So so there we are. We're in Olam Briya. We're in our conceptualizing place, and we're reaching out to something that's beyond that, to something that's just at a place of being, but we're not thinking about thinking anymore, which is hard, right? We don't easily get there. That's not where we are. I mean, it is Ba'omek, it's where we are all the time. Like there is nowhere else to be. But our mind sort of, fills things up, fills up space all the time. So I think that's where I am with this Shema thing and with the Olamot thing. It is, I think, it's one of the weird things about my relationship with Zalman of Shalom is that from very, very early on, like even before I really knew him, like like I tend to rediscover things that he discovered. So it's sort of kind of that kind of thing. Like before I knew anything about him, like it's still in Israel, like people came to me and said, like some Americans came to me and said, this thing you do with the Mishaberos, it's so beautiful. Did you learn that from Zalman? I said, who is Zalman? But mitbareh that I had rediscovered the same thing that he rediscovered, and it's happened to me quite a few times in life. So maybe this Olamot also, I'm rediscovering sort of his discoveries. You said it. It's not a big Imkvar. It's not a bad person to rediscover. Okay. Ad kan ozadi chudan, unless somebody wants to say something about that or wonder something or reflect on something.